Welcome everybody. My name is Tim Sandy. I'm a VMware Systems Engineer. Today I'd like to talk to you about NSX, which is a new offering that VMware has relating to software-defined networking. And today we're just going to talk on a 100 level. This is meant for more so for the sales individuals. So we're not going to be talking very technical. It's going to be mostly surface level. So in this picture we see here, it looks a little bit of a busy picture. It's basically representing the current IT challenges and the way IT departments are working right now and where we're looking to go in the future as an IT department. If you start off in the upper left-hand corner here, you'll see that the traditional IT department is working in this type of environment where everything's very siloed, where you have your storage, you have your compute, and your networking, and these tend to be different departments, at least for your larger scale networks and companies. And whenever you have to do anything, say add a new application server or servers, typically what has to happen is there needs to be communication between these departments. And this can sometimes slow down the process, and it can make that length of time that it takes to get a new application or servers up and running by the time all this communication happens between them. So again, the legacy IT departments are working in that very siloed type of structure, which complicates communication, which slows down any type of release of any new applications or servers. Now, if you recall when vSphere first came out, we greatly improved the compute stack by taking one physical server and being able to put a hypervisor on it, and then with that hypervisor it gave us the capability to be able to run multiple virtual machines, virtual servers, so that we can have multiple servers on that one physical server. So we abstracted the operating system from the hardware. And then we also try to include some automation in there. So again, moving towards that future state, you see that we are looking to have a local data center and then potentially a cloud environment, and also connect the two, so where we get the hybrid type approach. And the way we're improving all of this is by using that concept of abstraction as well as tying in automation and management to make the process much more smooth, to where everybody's working seamlessly together rather than individual departments. So again, you saw back in the early years of VMware, we changed the concept of the compute stack by virtualizing your servers. And then you've seen recently we've come out with the Virtual SAN product, which then virtualizes storage. And now we're talking about today virtualizing the network, and this all leads to the software-defined data center, where basically we're abstracting everything from the hardware, we're virtualizing it, so your compute stack, your storage, and your networking is all virtualized, making it much easier to work together. And of course we are throwing management on top of that to manage all of it using policies. This screen here, as you see, it's just a good summary of a bulk of the VMware products as a whole. It breaks it down at the top there, management and automation. So you have things like vCenter, vCloud Automation, vCenter Operations Management, IT Business Management. And then we have storage and availability, which is Site Recovery Manager, Virtual SAN. We have the compute stack, which is, of course, vSphere, like we said. And then the stack that we're talking about today is the network and security portion. So today, again, we're talking about NSX. Now, you also see that the vCloud Networking and Security product is also under that same stack as NSX. As a colleague of mine said in his presentation, think of vCloud Networking and Security kind of like NSX Lite. They work in the same space, the same stack, that network and security stack. However, vCloud Networking Security is as far as what it's capable of, is a NSX Lite. It can't do quite the extent that NSX can, but it does some of the basic functionalities of NSX. So again, we're talking about NSX, software-defined networking. So today, again, if you look at this structure that we have, at the bottom we have a physical networking infrastructure. That's your actual cables and your physical switches and routers. We have to have that base layer for our networking. That's always going to be there. And then we have some servers on top of that. And then, of course, we have the compute virtualization layer, which is, again, the ESXi hypervisor. Now, again, under this traditional model that we've been working under, provisioning any new servers and applications is very slow. It's not very mobile. It tends to be more hardware dependent. So it's not the best way to do business. But if we're moving more towards that software-defined data center, then we need to be able to abstract the networking layer as well. So here, as you see, again, we start off with that base structure of your network hardware, your switches and routers, and some servers, most likely your ESXi hypervisors. You have your compute network stack. But what we're going to do is we're going to pretend that we're building out a new application for a company. It's going to be a web application. It's got a web front end. Then it has some application servers, which actually house the application for it. And then we have some back-end database servers. And of course, they have to be able to communicate between each other, and we have to secure it using firewalls. So we start out here, and again, we deploy out the web front end, and that's the green network. And then now we put in the application servers, which is the red network. And then we continue on and we install the database servers, which is the blue network. So as you can see here, just to deploy these servers and deploy this web application, there's a lot of work involved. There's cables, you got to make sure there's ports open on switches, you have to configure the switches for the correct VLANs and such. And then again, we have to make sure that we secure it, so you have firewall rules that you have to build. Those lists can get very long and complicated. So as again, we build out this 3-tier web app, there's a lot of work involved, and it's very hard to provision this quickly. So again, we're looking to virtualize that network layer to help streamline all of this. So again, much like the 2 slides back, you see here we got the networking hardware, the servers, we have that compute virtualization layer, but now we have that network virtualization layer. So when we virtualize that, we can manipulate all of our networking within that network virtualization layer, and we're not having to actually manually go add any cables to switches. We're not having to configure those ports. Everything's done within the vSphere interface, and everything's done from a software-based level, making it much quicker and easier to be able to deploy applications and servers. Now, as you see here, it talks about the second bullet there, basically NSX can reproduce layer 2, layer 3 networking. And what they're talking about is, think about at your house, you have a modem and a wireless router. Those are kind of like your layer 2, layer 3 networking devices. Now, what NSX does is it virtualizes all that, except for now blow it out to the size of a company like Amazon or Google, and NSX can handle that type of quantity and size associated to virtual networks. Now you see the picture off to the right here is a representation of what NSX does for you. We're going to step through this in the next several slides to kind of help you understand what that is depicting. So we start off again with our base hardware layer of routers and switches. You're always going to have that base layer. And then, of course, what you're used to is probably a bunch of ESXi hosts, maybe some other physical servers, but that's your compute stack. And then, of course, with your ESXi hosts, gives you that hypervisor, which is in green there, and then within the hypervisor, we have the virtual switch on each individual one. And then what we do with NSX is we create this blanket network hypervisor that encompasses your entire IT environment. So it puts a network hypervisor layer on there. And with that, what we can do now, much like you would within vCenter with vApps and other things like that, we can now create virtual networks. In these virtual networks, we can do snapshots of the entire virtual network. We can do all sorts of manipulate it like we can as though it was a single virtual machine. But again, think of this in a large scale for somebody like Google that. So they have a huge network. They have many networks that they have to manage. And within that, they have security policies for firewalling, for security, and it's all done through policies and profiles, and that moves between the VMs. So again, traditionally, people previously would secure their networks using firewalls, but they were typically hardware-based devices. And they were those physical firewalls. They had to put traditional firewall rules in to manage them, which was very cumbersome and time-consuming. Then virtual firewalls came out. Some companies started using these virtual firewalls, but they still had to use the same methods, those traditional firewall rules and management ways of managing those firewalls. Again, they were very cumbersome to manage all the different rules, as well as adding that layer of either hardware or the virtual firewall. It would also slow things down. Now, with NSX, what we're doing is we're doing distributed networking and firewall. It's using automated policies to manage. It's using a distributed enforcement method so that all of your policies will move with a VM no matter what host they're on or what network. And it's because it is distributed, it scales out greatly. And it also, because it's built into the hypervisor, the performance is phenomenal in comparison to the traditional physical firewalls or even many of the virtual firewalls as well. So those are a lot of the benefits that you're going to get from using NSX and creating that network virtualization layer. So getting started, when you're talking to your partners and your customers and you want to know what to listen for, obviously, you want to listen for those trigger words. For example, like the slide that we did earlier with a web application. You got a company that's deploying web apps. They need to protect it. That is definitely something to listen for. Most people in their data centers already are using firewalls. Typically, they are using the firewall for incoming traffic into their network and some outgoing traffic. So it's an entry point in or out of their network. However, today with security, you also need to protect from within, because in case somebody can get into your network, you want to protect your internal network from people being able to get around to your entire internal network. And you also sometimes need to protect internally because of potentially disgruntled workers. That is always a security risk. So that is another thing to listen for. People that have firewalls with a ton of rules, they're spending a lot of time creating these firewall rules and maintaining them. Definitely a candidate for NSX. Also, a lot of larger companies bring in contractors to do work for them, so they subcontract out a job. So if they got a lot of contractors coming in and out, it's kind of hard for you to protect your network, to give them access to only the things that they need to access on your network, but not to the rest of it. So with NSX and virtual networking, it is very easy to assign a profile to your contractors and secure your network for them. Now, there are some things that you definitely want to listen for, because not everybody's going to be ready for NSX. A small to mid-sized business more than likely is not going to be necessarily a good candidate. So for starters, you have to be running vSphere 5.5 Enterprise Plus. So that is a bare minimum. Now, you can also be running vSphere Operations Management Enterprise Plus, as well as any of the vCloud suites, because both of those are built off of that vSphere 5.5 Enterprise Plus platform. The other thing is the company needs to have their network running on a 10 gig based network. 1 gig is just not going to be enough to handle NSX. You need to have a 10 gig network. So between running at the Enterprise 5.5 Enterprise Plus level as well as having a 10 gig network, again, it's probably not going to be a small to mid-sized business. It will be one of your larger sized businesses. But if you start talking to somebody that may be interested in NSX but is not ready for NSX at this point because they do not have the 10 gig backbone or are at the Enterprise Plus level, it kind of lets you know what the stepping point is when you're talking to them to say, okay, well, you need to, let's get you up to this point, and then once you get up to this point at Enterprise 5.5, vSphere 5.5 Enterprise Plus and the 10 gig network, then they can make that next step to NSX. As you can see here, we have many NSX partners that we have verified that NSX works with their hardware and software. As you see, companies like Riverbed, Dell, HP, Symantec, Palo Alto, some very big names. Now remember, NSX is, as far as the physical infrastructure, is totally physical hardware agnostic. So it doesn't matter what company's hardware, networking hardware is underneath. We're totally agnostic from that. So this list is only going to continue to grow and grow as we start working with more and more partners. So that completes the presentation on NSX. I hope this information was useful to get you started and to get a little bit of an idea of what NSX is and what it does. I want to thank you for joining me today. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to either your sales or technical representatives at Tech Data. I thank you very much.